It is the summer of 1943, and somewhere in the Mediterranean, a corpse is drifting towards the Spanish coast. He carries papers, letters, a photograph of a fiancée he never had, receipts from a London nightclub he never visited, and a set of military documents that will change the course of the Second World War. His name, according to his identity disc, is Captain William Martin of the Royal Marines. He does not exist. He never existed. But what he is carrying, what his cold, waterlogged hands are clutching in a briefcase chained to his wrist, is perhaps the most audacious lie ever told in the history of modern warfare. The body of Glyndwr Michael, a homeless Welshman who had died in London after ingesting rat poison, had been dressed in a Royal Marines uniform, given a manufactured identity, stuffed with false intelligence, and deposited from a British submarine into the waters off Huelva in southern Spain. Spanish authorities recovered the body. German intelligence, working through their contacts in neutral Spain, photographed the documents. And Adolf Hitler, the most powerful and paranoid man on earth, believed every word of it. This was Operation Mincemeat, and it was only one strand of a vast, extraordinary, and almost entirely forgotten campaign of strategic deception that Britain waged against Nazi Germany throughout the Second World War. A campaign that did not fire a single bullet, did not drop a single bomb, and yet may have done more to hasten Allied victory than many of the most celebrated military operations of the conflict. It was a campaign built on lies, theater, and a profound understanding of how the human mind, even the mind of a dictator, sees what it wants to see. What makes this story remarkable is not merely that it worked. It is that it worked repeatedly, on an industrial scale, against an enemy who was not stupid, whose intelligence services were formidable, and who had every reason to be suspicious. The British did not simply fool the Germans once. They fooled them systematically, over years, and with consequences that shaped the map of Europe as we know it today. To understand why Britain needed such a campaign, you need to understand the desperate position in which she found herself in the early years of the war. By 1940, France had fallen. The British Expeditionary Force had been humiliated at Dunkirk. The Royal Air Force had fought the Luftwaffe to a standstill over southern England. But Britain stood alone. Her armies stretched thin across a dozen theaters, her industrial capacity a fraction of what Germany could muster. She could not hope to match the Wehrmacht division for division, tank for tank, gun for gun. What she could do, what she had always done, in truth, throughout centuries of conflict, was think laterally, fight cleverly, use information as a weapon. The problem was that information, by 1941, was the one thing Britain had and Germany desperately wanted. German military intelligence, the Abwehr under Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, had spent years building a network of agents across Britain, or so they believed. In reality, every single German spy who arrived on British soil was either captured immediately or turned. By the end of 1941, MWAS in 5E, Britain's domestic counterintelligence service had achieved something that would have seemed impossible at the war's outset. They controlled, directly or indirectly, every active German agent in the United Kingdom. Every report those agents sent back to Hamburg and Berlin was read, approved, and in many cases authored by British intelligence officers. This was the double-cross system, so named because the Roman numeral for 20XX also resembled a double cross. It was administered by a committee known as the 20 Committee, chaired by a brilliant Oxford Don named John Masterman, and it represented perhaps the most complete intelligence coup in the history of espionage. But having control of the network was only half the challenge. The other half, the harder half, was deciding what to do with it. What false information do you feed an enemy? How do you craft a lie so convincing that a suspicious, technically sophisticated adversary will stake the lives of hundreds of thousands of soldiers on it? The answers to those questions required a new kind of institution, one that could coordinate the lies, ensure they were mutually consistent, and deploy them with such precision that even the most skeptical analyst in German military intelligence would be unable to find the seam. That institution was the London Controlling Section, established in 1941, and it would eventually be responsible for some of the most complex strategic deceptions in military history. The challenge it faced was enormous. A single inconsistency, a single detail that did not match, could unravel everything. The men and women who ran Britain's deception campaign were, by any measure, an extraordinary collection of individuals. They came from journalism, academia, the law, the theater, and the City of London. They included novelists, magicians, chess grandmasters, and at least one future creator of the world's most famous fictional spy. Ian Fleming, then a naval intelligence officer, contributed to several deception operations, and it is difficult not to see in the elaborate theatrical tradecraft of the double-cross system the DNA of James Bond's world. At the heart of the operation sat a group of controlled agents whose code names have since passed into legend. There was Garbo, Juan Pujol Garcia, a Spaniard of quite staggering ingenuity who had offered his services to British intelligence so fervently that when M16 initially turned him down, he went ahead and invented an entire network of fictional sub-agents on his own, feeding fabricated intelligence to the Germans from Lisbon before finally being brought to London and given proper resources. Garbo controlled, by the end of the war, a notional network of 27 imaginary agents spread across Britain. The Germans paid him handsomely. They awarded him the Iron Cross. He was simultaneously the most trusted agent in the German intelligence firmament and a man who was working tirelessly against them every single day. Then there was Tricycle, Duško Popov, a Serbian playboy and genuine double agent whose hedonistic lifestyle served as perfect cover for his intelligence work. Popov passed information about Pearl Harbor to the Americans months before the Japanese attack, information they failed to act upon. He seduced his way across neutral capitals, gambling at the casino tables of Estoril and Lisbon while carrying microdots of intelligence in his luggage. His code name referred to his preference for conducting his romantic affairs 3 at a time. There was Brutus, a Polish officer of rigid integrity who fed the Germans false order of battle information. There was Amut and Jeff, 2 Norwegian agents turned immediately upon arrival in Scotland. There was Treasure, a Frenchwoman, Lily Sergeyev, who ran her operation with fierce independence and nearly destroyed everything when a personal dispute with her EY-5 handler led her to briefly consider going rogue. Each of these individuals, real, complex, frightened, motivated by a dizzying variety of personal reasons, was a thread in a tapestry of deception that, when viewed from the German side, showed a completely false picture of British military intentions. The technical infrastructure supporting this operation was formidable. The Radio Security Service monitored German wireless traffic. Bletchley Park, through the Ultra program, broke the Enigma codes that allowed British analysts to read German assessments of the intelligence being passed to them. This feedback loop was crucial. It allowed the deception planners to know whether their lies were being believed, to correct inconsistencies before they became dangerous, and to calibrate the entire operation with extraordinary precision. The Germans were essentially helping Britain refine its deceptions by revealing exactly what they did and did not believe. If you are finding this interesting, a quick subscribe helps more than you know. It keeps this kind of research-heavy history coming. The operational use of this deception apparatus reached its most consequential expression in the campaigns of 1943 and 1944. Operation Mincemeat, the dead body in the Mediterranean, was designed to convince Hitler that the Allied invasion of southern Europe, then in planning, would target Greece and Sardinia rather than Sicily. The documents on the body of Captain William Martin suggested that Sicily was merely a diversion, a feint to draw German attention while the real blow fell elsewhere. It worked with a thoroughness that still staggers the imagination. German forces were redeployed to Greece and Sardinia. Rommel himself was sent to Greece to oversee the defense. Minefields were laid in Greek waters. When the Allied invasion of Sicily began on July 10, 1943, the defenses there were significantly weaker than they might otherwise have been. The campaign that followed, Operation Husky, succeeded in large part because Hitler had been looking the wrong way. But mincemeat, celebrated as it is, was almost a sideshow compared to what came next. Operation Bodyguard, the grand strategic deception surrounding the Normandy landings of June 1944, was arguably the largest and most complex military deception in human history. Its central component, Operation Fortitude, was built around the fiction that the main Allied invasion of France would not come at Normandy at all, but at the Pas de Calais, the narrowest point of the English Channel, the most logical landing site, the location that every German strategic analyst already considered the obvious target. To make this fiction credible, Britain and America constructed an entirely fictional army. The first United States Army Group, FUSAG, existed on paper, in German intelligence files, and in a blizzard of false radio traffic, notional troop movements, and fabricated logistics. It was commanded, at least fictionally, by General George S. Patton, the most feared and respected American commander in German eyes, whose assignment to what appeared to be the main invasion force seemed to confirm every German assumption about where the blow would fall. Garbo and his network of imaginary agents provided a stream of detailed, plausible, and entirely false intelligence about FUSAG's composition, disposition, and intentions. German reconnaissance aircraft flying over southeast England photographed what appeared to be vast encampments of vehicles, landing craft, and equipment. In reality, inflatable rubber tanks and plywood lorries assembled by a team of prop makers and theater set designers who brought the same skills to military deception that they had previously applied to the West End stage. The German equivalents of these deception operations were, by comparison, almost amateurish. The Abwehr ran several counter-deception and disinformation campaigns, but they were hamstrung from the start by a fundamental problem. They had no reliable agents in Britain. Every source they thought they had was under British control. When German analysts cross-referenced information from multiple agents, they were, without knowing it, cross-referencing multiple streams of British-authored fiction. The corroboration they found was real, but it was corroborating a lie. The Americans, for their part, contributed significantly to the deception campaign through their own outfit, the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, better known as the Ghost Army. Operating primarily in France after D-Day, the Ghost Army used sonic deception, inflatable equipment, and radio impersonation to simulate the presence of entire divisions. But the strategic, long-range deception, the kind that manipulated Hitler's decisions about where to place entire army groups, remained primarily a British achievement, built on years of patient groundwork and the unique asset of ultra-intelligence. The Japanese studied British deception methods after the war with considerable interest. The Soviets, who had their own sophisticated tradition of military maskirovka, concealment and deception, found much to admire in the British approach. The Americans institutionalized many of the lessons into their own intelligence doctrine in the decades that followed. The actual historical impact of Britain's disinformation campaign is, inevitably, a matter of some debate among historians. Measuring the effect of something that did not happen, the German reinforcements that were not at Normandy on June 6, 1944, the divisions held in reserve for a Pas-de-Calais landing that never came, is inherently imprecise. What the records do show, however, is that for a crucial period after the Normandy landings, Hitler refused to release his panzer reserves to counterattack. He believed, on the basis of intelligence provided almost entirely by Garbo, that Normandy was a feint and the real invasion was still to come at Calais. Those extra days, those critical hours in which Allied forces consolidated their beachhead, may have been decisive. The psychological impact on German military planning was profound and lasting. Senior Wehrmacht officers, reviewing the war after its conclusion, spoke repeatedly of their inability to trust any intelligence assessment, their constant fear that what they were seeing was itself a deception. This epistemic vertigo, this inability to know what was real, was itself a weapon, and a formidable one. Garbo was awarded the MBE by the British and the Iron Cross by the Germans. He is the only person known to have received formal recognition from both sides in the same conflict. He died in 1988, having spent decades living quietly in Venezuela under a false identity. His role in the war a secret he kept with characteristic thoroughness. The London Controlling Section's files remained classified for decades. The full extent of the double-cross system was not publicly acknowledged until John Masterman published his account in 1972, after a prolonged battle with the Official Secrets Act. Let us return for a moment to that body drifting in the Mediterranean waters off Huelva, to Glyndwr Michael, a man who had no family, no fixed address, no place in the world, and who became, in death, the crucial instrument of one of the war's most significant deceptions. He was given a name, a rank, a fiancé, a wallet full of theater tickets and receipts and the small debris of a life. He was buried in Spain with full military honors. After the war, when the operation was declassified, his grave was updated. The headstone now reads, Glyndwr Michael, served as Major William Martin, Royal Marines. He had two identities in life, one in death, and he altered the course of history without ever knowing it. Consider what Britain achieved. With a handful of controlled agents, a corps of brilliant planners, an infrastructure of radio deception, and a supply of inflatable rubber tanks, she convinced the most militarized nation on Earth, a nation of formidable analytical intelligence, of skilled military professionals, of deeply suspicious security services, to make its most consequential strategic decisions on the basis of fiction. She did not merely fool the Germans once. She fooled them about Sicily. She fooled them about Sardinia. She fooled them about Greece. She fooled them about Normandy. She fooled them about the Pas de Calais. She maintained the fiction of the non-existent FUSAG for months after D-Day, tying down divisions that might otherwise have flung the Allies back into the sea. No single weapon system in the British arsenal, not the Spitfire, not the Lancaster bomber, not the Churchill tank, could claim to have saved as many lives or shortened the war by as many months as this invisible campaign, fought in requisitioned offices in London, in the drawing rooms of Lisbon, in Spanish fishing villages, and in the imagination of a dead Welshman floating face down towards a foreign shore. The Germans lost the war for many reasons. They were outproduced, outfought, and ultimately overwhelmed by the combined resources of half the world. But in the critical years of the mid-war period, when the outcome was still genuinely uncertain, they were also, systematically and comprehensively, outthought. They did not lose merely on the battlefield. They lost in the minds of their own commanders, in the corrupted intelligence assessments that fed those minds false pictures of reality, in the strategic decisions made on the basis of information that was, from the very beginning, exactly what Britain wanted them to believe. In war, the greatest victories are sometimes won not by force, but by convincing your enemy to defeat himself. Britain, in the Second World War, achieved precisely that, and almost nobody remembers it. The greatest trick Britain ever pulled was convincing the Germans the deception was real. The second greatest trick was convincing the rest of us it never happened.